各位听众您好，这里是 iGo News， 欢迎收听美国晚间新闻会诊，狐狸台观点。
Hello there, this is iGo News. Welcome to our U.S. Nightly News Summary from a Holy Channel perspective.
随着我们进入选举日前的最后48小时，全国的紧张气氛达到顶点。
As we enter the final 48 hours before Election Day, tensions across the nation are reaching their peak.
两个竞选团队都全力投入最后冲刺，频繁播放广告，并在关键摇摆州进行多次集会，同时派出大量志愿者争取每一位可能的选民。
Both campaigns are fully engaged in a last-minute push, saturating the airwaves with ads, making multiple rally stops across key swing states, and deploying an army of volunteers in a bid to turn out every possible voter.
对于副总统卡马拉哈里斯而言，他的信息十分明确，在稳定、关爱和经济复苏的愿景下团结美国人。
For Vice President Kamala Harris, the message is clear. Unite Americans under a vision of stability, compassion, and economic recovery.
而前总统唐纳德·特朗普则召集支持者，呼吁恢复他所称的美国失去的力量，并对抗他所谓的激进左翼政策。
Former President Donald Trump, on the other hand, is rallying his supporters with calls to restore what he describes as America's lost strength and to combat what he calls radical left policies.
民调显示，这场选战成为近期记忆中最紧张的一次。一些调查显示，不论在普选票还是摇摆州统计上，两位候选人势均力敌。
Polls show this race as one of the tightest in recent memory, with some surveys indicating a dead heat in both popular vote projections and battleground state tallies.
根据 ABC 新闻和易普所的最新数据，近3%的选民认为国家正走错方向，这标志着自1986年以来选前最大的不满程度。
According to recent numbers from ABC News and Ipsos, nearly 3/4 of voters feel the country is on the wrong track, marking the most significant level of dissatisfaction heading into an election since 1986.
经济困难是这种不满的主要驱动力，通胀、高昂的食品价格和能源成本给全国各地家庭带来压力。
Economic hardship has been a major driver of that discontent, as inflation, high grocery prices, and energy costs weigh on households across the country.
特朗普的竞选活动高度聚焦于这些问题，承诺解决通胀、减税并增加国内能源生产，以缓解美国民众的经济压力。
Trump's campaign has focused heavily on these issues, promising to tackle inflation, cut taxes, and increase domestic energy production to ease the strain on American wallets.
哈里斯则提出更多进步的经济政策，包括针对中产阶级的减税、对企业价格欺诈的新规定以及联邦对绿色能源的投资。
Harris has countered with promises of more progressive economic policies, including targeted tax relief for the middle class, new regulations on corporate price gouging, and federal investment in green energy.
在宾夕法尼亚、乔治亚和密歇根等关键州，地方议题为选民的决策增添了细微差别。
In key states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan, local issues are adding nuance to voters' decisions.
在密歇根州，一个高度依赖汽车产业的州，特朗普警告说，哈里斯推行的电动车转型政策可能会摧毁传统汽车制造业的工作。
In Michigan, a state deeply invested in the auto industry, Trump has warned that Harris's plans to mandate a transition to electric vehicles could devastate traditional car manufacturing jobs.
他指出，哈里斯的环保政策会将竞争优势让给中国等国家，可能会使数千美国工人失去工作。
He has argued that Harris's environmental policies would cede competitive advantages to countries like China, potentially displacing thousands of American workers.
哈里斯则表示，向电动车转型是应对气候变化的必要步骤，同时将其描绘为创造清洁能源领域高薪工作的机会。
Harris, for her part, has pitched the transition to electric vehicles as a necessary step toward combating climate change, while framing it as an opportunity to create new high-paying jobs in clean energy sectors.
密歇根选民正在权衡环保政策的长期利益与对传统制造业工作带来的短期经济影响。
Michigan voters are left to weigh the long-term benefits of environmental policy against the immediate economic impacts on traditional manufacturing jobs.
公共安全和犯罪问题也成为重要议题，尤其是随着全国犯罪率在过去几年上升。
Public safety and crime have also emerged as critical issues, especially as national crime rates have risen over the past few years.
这使得加利福尼亚州成为焦点之一，其中的第36号提案加强重犯者处罚的投票法案获得了强烈支持。根据最近的民调，73%的加州人支持该提案。
This has put a spotlight on states like California, where Proposition 36, a ballot measure to impose stricter penalties for repeat offenders, has seen strong support, with 73% of Californians backing the initiative according to recent polling.
尽管曾担任加州检察长，哈里斯回避了对该提案的明确立场，此举遭到批评者的指责。他们认为他的竞选团队在回避敏感问题，以避免疏远任何潜在选民。
Despite her previous role as California Attorney General, Harris has refrained from taking a clear stance on the measure, a move that has drawn criticism from those who say her campaign is avoiding positions on hot-button issues to prevent alienating any potential voters.
特朗普则利用这一点，将哈里斯描绘为与渴望更严格犯罪政策的美国民众脱节。
Trump has seized on this, framing Harris as out of touch with Americans who want tougher crime policies.
他将其竞选的犯罪讯息集中于犯罪激增的主要城市，尤其是在加州和伊利诺伊州。
He has focused his campaign's crime messaging on major cities, many of which have seen significant crime spikes, particularly in California and Illinois.
移民辩论仍是特朗普最后诉求的核心议题，这个长期具有分歧性的话题仍占据中心位置。
The immigration debate, which has long been a divisive topic, remains central to Trump's closing arguments.
特朗普承诺将严厉打击非法移民，加强边境安全，并优先考虑美国公民的就业。
Trump has promised that he will clamp down on illegal immigration, strengthen border security, and prioritize American jobs for American citizens.
他认为高移民水平推高了犯罪率，并给地方经济带来压力，尤其是在边境州。
He contends that high immigration levels are driving up crime rates and straining local economies, particularly in border states.
与此同时，哈里斯则主张平衡的移民政策，包括全面改革，为长期无证居住者提供公民身份途径，以及保护 DACA 受益者。
Harris, meanwhile, has advocated for a balanced immigration policy that includes comprehensive reform, a pathway to citizenship for long-term undocumented residents, and protections for DACA recipients.
两位候选人截然不同的立场反映出国内对移民政策的广泛分歧。特朗普的支持者赞扬他强硬的立场，而哈里斯的支持者则强调同情心和人道主义原则的重要性。
The candidates' divergent approaches reflect broader national divides on immigration policy, with Trump supporters applauding his hardline stance while Harris advocates emphasize the importance of compassion and humanitarian principles.
另一个备受关注的议题是医疗保健。
Another high-profile issue is healthcare.
哈里斯重申了保护和扩展平价医疗法案的承诺，目标是为数百万美国人提供可负担的医疗保健。
Harris has reaffirmed her commitment to protecting and expanding the Affordable Care Act, aiming to provide accessible health care for millions of Americans.
他承诺降低处方药价格并扩大覆盖范围，特别是针对低收入家庭。
She has promised to reduce prescription drug prices and expand coverage, especially for lower-income families.
特朗普批评这些政策过于昂贵，他主张进行重大医疗体系改革，以提高效率、减少官僚主义，并降低消费者成本。
Trump has criticized these policies as too expensive, arguing instead for a major overhaul of the healthcare system to improve efficiency, reduce bureaucracy, and lower costs for consumers.
他的竞选团队尚未公布详细计划，这点被哈里斯的竞选团队用来质疑他解决医疗危机的决心。
His campaign has yet to release a detailed plan, which Harris's campaign has used to question his commitment to solving the healthcare crisis.
民调一贯显示，选民不仅对候选人意见分歧，对这些核心议题也持不同看法。
Polling has consistently shown that voters are closely split, not just on the candidates, but on these core issues.
在几个州，特朗普在男性选民中领先，这些选民被他复苏经济和边境安全的承诺所吸引。
In several states, Trump holds a lead among male voters, who appear drawn to his promises of economic revival and border security.
然而，哈里斯在女性选民中占优势，特别是年轻选民，对他在生育权、性别平等和教育改革上的立场产生共鸣。
Harris, however, has an edge with women, especially younger voters, who resonate with her stance on reproductive rights, gender equality, and educational reforms.
事实上，性别差距是近期历史上最大的。特朗普在男性中领先多达18个百分点，而哈里斯在女性中领先16个百分点。
In fact, the gender gap is one of the largest in recent history, with Trump holding a lead among men by as much as 18 points, while Harris is up among women by 16 points.
郊区选民，特别是女性，已成为宾夕法尼亚和北卡罗来纳等摇摆州的关键因素。
The suburban vote, particularly among women, is also shaping up to be a critical factor in swing states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina.
两个竞选团队都大力针对这些群体。哈里斯强调他对公共教育、儿童保育和医疗保健的支持，而特朗普则专注于安全、经济自由和家庭价值观。
Both campaigns have heavily targeted these communities, with Harris emphasizing her support for public education, childcare, and healthcare, while Trump focuses on safety, economic freedom, and family values.
年轻选民的投票率一直是哈里斯竞选活动的重点，他在城市地区得到了年轻选民的强力支持。
Youth turnout has been a major focus of the Harris campaign, which has seen strong support from younger voters in urban areas.
哈里斯花了相当多的时间在大学和大专院校竞选，谈论学生债务减免、气候变迁和创造就业机会等议题。
Harris has spent considerable time campaigning at colleges and universities, addressing issues like student debt relief, climate change, and job creation.
相对而言，特朗普则将他的关注集中在经济议题上，例如创造就业和职业培训，将其政策描绘为年轻美国人实现财务独立的途径，而不必累积学生债务。
Trump has, in contrast, centered his outreach on economic issues, such as job creation and vocational training, framing his policies as a pathway for young Americans to gain financial independence without necessarily accruing student debt.
尽管他对年轻选民有吸引力，哈里斯过去曾形容年轻人愚蠢的言论在竞选的最后阶段重新浮现，遭到批评。
Despite her appeal to younger voters, Harris has faced criticism for a remark from her past describing young people as stupid, a comment that has resurfaced in the campaign's final days.
批评者以此为例，认为他与该族群有距离，而他的竞选团队则试图将重点转回到他的政策建议上。
Critics have used this as an example of her perceived detachment from the demographic, while her campaign has attempted to shift focus back to her policy proposals.
随着选举日临近，双方竞选团队正准备迎接可能创纪录的投票率。
As Election Day approaches, both campaigns are bracing for what could be a historic voter turnout.
在提前投票中，数字已经超过了前几次选举的记录，显示出公众的高度关注和参与。
In early voting, numbers have already surpassed records set in previous elections, suggesting heightened public interest and engagement.
选举官员正在为几个预计竞争激烈的州的潜在重新计票和法律挑战做好准备。
Election officials are preparing for potential recounts and legal challenges in several states, particularly those expected to be closely contested.
双方的法律团队随时待命，准备应对计票最终阶段中可能出现的任何问题。
Legal teams from both campaigns are on standby, ready to respond to any issues that may arise in the final tally.
摇摆州依然是决定结果的关键。
The battleground states remain critical to the outcome.
威斯康星、宾夕法尼亚和乔治亚等州成为焦点，两位候选人多次到访这些地区。
States like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia are in the spotlight, with both candidates making repeated stops in these areas.
在宾夕法尼亚州，竞选几乎处于平手状态，特朗普和哈里斯都向费城和匹兹堡周围的郊区选民发出呼吁。
In Pennsylvania, the race is virtually deadlocked, as both Trump and Harris appeal to suburban voters around Philadelphia and Pittsburgh.
在威斯康星州，最近的民调显示特朗普略有领先，尽管哈里斯的竞选团队认为密尔沃基等城市的高投票率可能会使他占优势。
In Wisconsin, recent polling suggests a slight lean towards Trump, though Harris's campaign believes that high urban turnout in cities like Milwaukee could tip the scales in her favor.
乔治亚在最近几次选举中竞争愈加激烈，两个竞选团队都在努力推动亚特兰大和其他城市中心的高投票率。
Georgia, which has grown more competitive in recent elections, remains a tight race, with both campaigns pushing hard for a high turnout in Atlanta and other urban centers.
特朗普特别强调，他相信这场选举可以带来所谓的经济复苏，承诺减税、简化商业法规和促进能源独立。
Trump has been particularly vocal about his belief that the election could bring what he calls an economic revival, with promises to cut taxes, streamline business regulations, and promote energy independence.
他将选举描述为一个选择，是选择他的政策带来的经济增长，还是所谓激进左翼议程下的停滞。
He has framed the election as a choice between economic growth under his policies or stagnation under what he terms the radical left agenda of the Harris administration.
哈里斯则呼吁那些认为当前经济体系对企业有利的选民，主张采取更平衡的方式，支持工薪家庭、医疗可及性和气候倡议。
Harris, meanwhile, has appealed to voters who feel that the current economic system is rigged in favor of corporations, advocating for a more balanced approach that supports working families, healthcare access, and climate initiatives.
在竞选的最后时刻，两个团队全力以赴。
In the campaign's final hours, both teams are pulling out all the stops.
特朗普计划在北卡罗来纳、宾夕法尼亚和密歇根举行集会，并在大激流城进行最后的竞选活动，象征性的致敬他2016年的胜利之旅。
Trump has rallies planned in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, with his final campaign stop in Grand Rapids, a symbolic nod to his 2016 victory lap.
哈里斯将在选举日留在宾夕法尼亚，他的团队组织了包括高知名度的民主党支持者和名人在内的集会。
Harris will spend Election Day in Pennsylvania, where her team has organized a rally with high-profile Democratic supporters and celebrities.
他的团队希望费城等城市的高投票率能够助他赢得该州。
Her team hopes that a strong turnout in cities like Philadelphia could carry the state.
选举安全也是重点，官员们正在努力确保过程顺利安全，因为有报告称可能会出现干扰。
Election security is also in focus as officials work to ensure a smooth and safe process amid reports of possible disruptions.
此外，社交媒体平台已加大打击错误资讯的力度，确保选民获得准确的资讯。
In addition, social media platforms have ramped up efforts to combat misinformation and ensure voters have accurate information.
全国各地的投票站增加了非党派组织的监控，志愿者随时协助选民，防止任何潜在的恐吓行为。
Polling stations across the country are seeing increased monitoring from nonpartisan organizations, with volunteers on hand to assist voters and safeguard against any potential intimidation.
这场选举的结果很可能取决于关键摇摆州中几千张选票，影响未来数代美国的发展。
This election will likely hinge on a few thousand votes across key battlegrounds, with implications that could shape the country's future for generations.
每一张选票都比以往更为重要。两位候选人也在最后的诉求中提醒选民这次选举的重要性。
Each vote is more crucial than ever as both candidates make their final appeals, reminding voters of what's at stake.
到明天这个时候，数百万美国人将亲自投票或寄出最后的邮寄选票，为可能成为美国历史上最具深远意义的选举之一铺平道路。
By this time tomorrow, millions of Americans will be casting ballots in person or finalizing their choices by mail, setting the stage for what could be one of the most consequential elections in American history.
以上新闻资讯整理自狐狸台，由 iGo News 编辑播报。感谢您的收听，期待与您空中再会。
The above news information is compiled from a Huli channel and presented by iGo News. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to your continued company on the air.